Right, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Chris Ogle, and I'm kind of hosting this meeting this afternoon. And I've got two guests on here. They're going to be doing all the talking. I'm just going to be sitting here open, just throwing a bit in every now and then. But Otis, do you want to introduce yourself? How did you get?
Yeah, I'm Otis. As some of you may be seeing this on Oglebox, that's kind of what I'm doing at the moment. Just trying to share conversations, have conversations about what's going on in the world, and just an eclectic mix of conversations to try and decipher things, I guess. And that's what I'm doing. That's where I'm spending my time at the moment. It's fun. It's enjoyable getting to meet new different people and have some fun and sometimes difficult chats. So yeah, it's been interesting.
Brilliant. Jenny, how about you? We've known each other for a while now, so.
We must go back to the Link for Growth meetings that we had, what, 8-9 years ago?
Yeah.
A while ago. Yeah. So, on a postage stamp, if I can, I'm a psychotherapist of 20 years. I've been a Buddhist for nearly 40 years. And in the last 4 years, I've been working with a project called Get Digging It, which is something that I've created. And it was born on the back of coming back from Kashmir in the middle of what effectively was civil war, and coming home to my cosy little house in Dunmo and thinking, my God, we are a hair's breadth away from all the supply lines going down, from civil unrest, and we don't even know it. I'd already had my head in all kinds of truth movement stuff for the previous number of years. But when I got back from Kashmir, there were two things. One, obviously, we were living in a very fragile system, and I understood how fragile it was. But secondly, nobody in the world heard about what was going on in Kashmir at that time. So I also understood the power of the media and how incredibly powerful the media is to be able to stifle massive civil unrest, and subsequently even anything I've ever shared on Facebook with the word Kashmir in gets taken down. So you start to have first-hand experience of this media manipulation, and then of course we've come into this recent crisis, and for those of us that have been studying this kind of phenomenon for many, many years, this kind of truth thing, suddenly in sort of end of February, early March, we were seeing all of the agendas rolling out in parallel. And I went into a state of obsessive researching for about a month, around about March. It's put me in good stead because I've never met so many lifelong friends in the last 3 months. And what I mean by that is suddenly you're resonating with the same frequency as other people. That's how you and I have met, Otis. We've seen each other online. You're connected to Chris, obviously. And, you know, you start to realise that our hearts are beating as one. We see a truth that many people don't see because they're still under the veil of illusion. And the question is, how do we navigate through this? And then I'm going to hand back to Chris in a moment. How do we navigate through this? And, you know, what do we do about it?
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, you know, there are I don't like using the word, but there are realities that we all perceive, obviously, and it's all individual to us. And it's like, how do we get to that the crux of it? Nobody really knows, because that's what lends itself to all this confusion and division that we see. And it's like, why is that allowed to transpire? Why are we allowed to live in a society with that amount of confusion and uncertainty? And how do we pave a way where we don't have that? Which I guess is what this is kind of about. So I'll hand it back to you, Dad.
Yeah, so thanks for that. So my background really, which is relevant to this, is part of the team that put together Link for Growth back in 2011. In fact, I'm the only one left from that original team, although Otis has suddenly reappeared out of nowhere. So he's now back here on board with us. But yeah, Link for Growth was initially established a bit ahead of its time, really, recognising that society was about to go into a a spiral downwards, because we'd become a bloated world with a bloated economy, which is basically a lot of vapor money, which has no real value, and we were going to have to contract. And at the point of contraction, there's a lot of pain. So Link for Growth was originally set up to basically build a safety net such that there would be enough people out there, certainly in the UK, that would be able to, so if you like, initiate a support platform for people that started to realise things weren't ever going to go back to the way they were. Now, it's taken a while for us to get to that, but in 2020, it looks like we finally hit that particular point. And A Link for Growth basically brings people together to have conversations which are now being taken place online through things like Zoom, such that we can bring together people who have not the answers, but are prepared to talk about the difficult subjects that need to be discussed, because the answers are not going to be created from the intelligence that got us in this mess. We need to have conversations which take us beyond that. And consequently, here we are today with some bright folk who are kind of probably a little bit more investigative than others, so they kind of have more awareness of some of the things that are going on, more balanced perspectives, maybe able to see things from different angles, and therefore not be judgmental or critical of people who are maybe where they are for whatever reason. Now, some interesting conversations that I've been having recently is things like, let's get back to normal. When are we going to get back to normal? Well, let's remind ourselves, normal wasn't great. Normal had lots of people committing suicide, people who are incredibly depressed. 1 in 4 people I heard being depressed, anxious, worried, and just unsure about what was going forward. All traditional business jobs, if you like, lawyers, accountants and stuff like that, no longer secure pathways to a future where you're guaranteed an income for 30 years, all those things going. And therefore, 21st century has become a century of uncertainty and no fixed program going forward. So that means we have to be more resilient. We have to be way more, have much more of a spirit of adventurer. Now we go on holiday and we go out on an adventure because we've never been there before, and we see lots of different things, you know, but we need to be doing that in our life, not just plodding along, but like taking each day and saying, do you know what, whatever life throws at me, I'm going to be resourceful enough to deal with it. Mm-hmm. But what kind of environment do we need to create which gives people the opportunity to do that? And that's really what the subject of this discussion is today, is what's a new normal going to potentially look like. So over to you guys.
Succinctly put, I would say. Yeah.
I mean, there's multifaceted sides to this. Obviously, there's the physical, what do we do? And then there's the mental, emotional, what do we do? And I think, you know, from a mental, emotional point of view, we need to journey inwards and we need to find our own peace. Now, that is incredibly difficult in these, you know, very mind-bending times with the media. But one thing I would advise to people is stop watching the mainstream media, because that is not taking you anywhere that any of us want to go. So stop watching it. Stop getting riled and upset by what's going on in the news, because it's not news, it's propaganda. So once you disengage from that, you have more potential to go inwards. And I think the going inwards is about understanding what we're responsible for and what we're not responsible for, and finding resourceful ways of engaging with people that you have disputes with or unpleasantness with, and seeing if you can find some common ground and some common humanity, because we're going to have to do that. I mean, the great thing about this recent lockdown is that at least people are realising the value of community. So, you know, and people are helping each other more than we've ever seen. And as Chris was saying in our preamble before we started, you know, people don't need to be fully online with the whole truth agenda. They just need to be able to communicate. And I think, you know, from a personal development point of view, we just need to take responsibility for what's going on for us and stop blaming and holding other people to account for how we feel. Yeah. So that's my first foray into that question. What about you, Otis?
Yeah, I think it calls into question sort of like this whole fragility thing, which is that, you know, these conversations, it's like, I see it on social media all the time. Somebody just puts an opinion down, someone disagrees with it, and then that's it. Both people walk away from the conversation, both thinking that they're right and that they're satisfied with what their input's been. And, you know, it's that I think is the issue. It's bridging those conversations. It's having compassion, empathy for someone's journey and what they've been through, and recognizing what works for them might not be what works for you, and vice versa. So within that, I do think the answers come from conversations, and you know, like you say, it's an emotional, personal responsibility of making that transition in your head of not being dismissive, not being defensive, not being a host of reactions that you don't really know where they come from, and kind of look inwards and figure that out. And from there, it goes step on step on step, you know. That's the kind of way I perceive it.
I think we've got trained by society over tens of years, decades and decades, to be focused on comparisons with other people, which forces us to look outside ourselves for the answers, or for at least deciding how well we're doing in relation to other people. And consequently, we're always looking outside ourselves, and like you, Jenny, was saying, we're not looking inside ourselves for that inner peace. And that's that whole idea of comparison, and it's propagated on the TV. And I mean, fortunately, they brought in digital TV in 2012, and I had an analog TV and never upgraded, so I was instantly cut out, and I've never gone back. So I've not had a TV for 8 years. But I don't get involved in that. For me, it's about you know, I will listen to what other people have to say and take that on board. But ultimately, I'm looking at my experiences and people who I trust to give me the information for me to be able to make conscious choices. And it's choices that we all have. And I think society in general has forgotten the fact that it can make a choice. It can decide what to do. We just, oh, you've got to stay inside, lockdown. Oh, okay then. And that's kind of the end of it. It's like, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't work for me. You know, I'm going to find a way to go outside because I know what's important to me. And I think people just said, well, no, if you've got to stay inside, you've got to stay inside and put up with it. What if you don't like staying inside? Well, what about that? How's that fit in? And I think our spirit of adventurer and just saying, well, actually, do you know what? I'm going to just go out and do some exercise then, or I'm going to find a way to go and do stuff which, all right, complies by the rules, but, you know, you can be stretchy with those rules if you, and be a bit flexible and have some excuses put to one side if you need them. But it's just about finding out what works for you. And, you know, we never go anywhere if we don't stretch the rules, do we? If we don't stretch the boundaries, we're just stuck within the same old box.
I think within that is like kind of like I put this sort of question to somebody today. Well, not question, but I posed this to them where I said, we look at space and we look at the universe and we recognize that we don't understand it all in its entirety, yet we have the sort of ignorance to look at this virus and bacteria and immunology and the microbiome and the gut and how it all affects us. We just like as arrogant as to say that we figured it all out and that we know it all, and that we, you know, and honestly, it's like we simply don't. It's like, how can we, you know, that's what I don't like about these sort of dogmatic reactions to this science, and things are being imposed on us, say, for instance, the lockdown. And if you are of the perspective and you've studied, or you're a microbiologist or whatever, there's enough information out there. If you discern that your risk isn't as much as somebody else's based on your understanding of the virus and your own situation, it's like, who is anybody to say to you, well, you're putting somebody else's life at risk? Well, no, I'm not, because I've found out what's worked for me, and I've done my research, and I have gotten a perspective. So there's that in there as well, I guess.
And I think as well, like this idea that, you know, that, for example, it's all based on germ theory. This is a theory, okay? And when you've got a theory, everything seems to confirm the theory. It's called, oh, it's got a name in hypnotherapy. I can't remember what it's called now. But anyway, you know, you can set up an idea and everything will confirm that idea. It's how we operate in the world.
Confirmation bias.
That's it, confirmation bias. So, you know, if that's what you're looking for, that's what you're going to find. And, you know, the kind of research I've been doing is that the germ theory is a theory. There's actually a much more inclusive theory, and it's a theory of terrain. And that is that we're only ever unwell when the terrain that we live in is also unwell. So we're looking at the body. So whatever foods you feed it, whatever thoughts you give it, that's terrain. And then the terrain as well is what's going on in your environment. And we have endless microwave radiation signals now, all kinds of frequencies going through, and interference from these frequencies. This isn't just, oh, well, we need that frequency to run the internet. No, we don't. No, we don't. These frequencies are being used to manipulate the minds of people, and this we know. So, you know, so as a result, people aren't aware. If you're not aware of yourself, you don't have self-knowledge, you're very easily moved with the masses. Just like in 1984, George Orwell's, you know, they literally flick a button and everyone goes, yeah, we whatever, and they start cheering. And that's exactly what's going on here. Self-knowledge is the way to your own freedom and liberation. That's how you start to become mature, responsible for your decisions, and therefore leaders. You know, leaders are people that are taking self-responsibility. And we need hundreds of leaders, not big trumps, but I mean community leaders, not common purpose leaders who have all been programmed to come out in lockstep with their instructors at the top, but local free leaders who understand what it takes to stay calm, to be resourceful, to help people organize themselves. And that's all of us that are awake and aware. You know, we all have to become a leader, and that's what I'm saying. And everyone has their particular role or function as a leader. Not everyone has the same function as a leader.
It's really interesting you talk about this because, you know, during the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, I've seen no end of projects start, community projects. And by and large, the first question that comes up, whatever the project is, where are we going to get the money to do the project? And guess what? We're heading into a place where there isn't any money, right? Where there is going to be very little spare money floating about for anything. So a better question is, how are we going to do this project without any money? But that's a much better question, because what it does is it invokes the brain into creativity. Who do I know? Who's got the skills? Who can I bring into this to support us in what we're doing? And then you build a team. And then that team, which is a community in its own right, all with a desire to see the outcome happen, because that's why they decided to get involved, and they make it happen. But there's a much bigger chance of it being successful because there's no one breathing down their neck saying, where's that money gone? What have you done with it? Is it and judging you for what you might have made?
Or controlling things with that money, you know, saying
exactly.
the money tree's going to end, if you don't do this.
You didn't support me in that last election. I'm taking that money back.
Yeah, and I think there's a you know, I shared something on my Facebook yesterday that pointed to say that, you know, it's not something that we're still deciding whether it's happening or not. Mainstream media do influence things, and they share old photos to promote a narrative that they've got going on at the moment. Like, this is the reality we're living in. It's not like up for debate or whether you believe this or not. And, you know, to think that the governments aren't in some way being influenced by the people with money is simply naive, in my opinion. And I don't want to flame anybody, but it is, because we know it's happening. So at this point, it's like, yeah, like you say, it's about, you know, not just sitting there and going, well, it's not my problem. I think that's kind of like the personal responsibility element of it. It's looking out the window and expecting everything to change by judging everybody and saying they're doing it wrong. Instead, you know, reflecting inwards and going, how can I be that change myself?
Absolutely.
And from there, we can set the example, as it were.
I mean, I'm just privy to a couple of stories that have happened in Watford, where I live, that first of all, into in financial difficulty now. Into 4 years ago, expanded their operation in Watford by taking on a huge lease and redeveloping a part of the Charter Place with almost a £200 million investment. Now that transformed Watford, and this is something I just thought of this morning, by the way. That transformed Watford into almost like a retail centre for the area that we're in, which expands, I don't know, 15, 20 miles around the perimeter of Watford. So it includes, I don't know, 3 million, maybe 4 million people as a potential catchment area. Now that project is now looking like it's on shaky ground because Inter are in financial difficulty. And then today, reported in the paper, Debenhams, which is a flagship, the Watford store was the flagship store, is now not going to reopen ever. Right, so they're closing it. One of the 3 announcements of the Milton Keynes is another one, and somewhere else as well. So what we've got here is a situation where retail and the old systems are definitely coming to an end. And Tim Watkins, a friend of mine from Wales, who's a very deep, he's a researcher by trade, that's what he does. And he's written some really interesting posts about how the society is going to have to move towards a managed contraction. And actually it has to be managed because otherwise it will be chaos. So rather than a green agenda or capitalism and materialism, we've got to go into this area of managed degradation, if you like, managed contraction. And the interesting point is, okay, if we know that this is likely to happen, and if you look at the trends of employment after furlough and all this kind of stuff, you kind of know that it's going to be a contraction of 15% or so. It's huge. It's going to be a huge impact. Money not so prevalent, spending not as high, housing market affected, school affected, universities affected, education, health affected, everything affected by what's just gone on to a scale that most people aren't really thinking about because it's frightening and it's scary. And how are we going to manage our way through that and start to create, I don't know, green shoots and the thoughts of hope? Because actually that's quite a scary thing for people to ponder. And it requires, as you said, Jenny, going inside ourselves. And I think this period of shutdown has enabled people to actually at least experience, what can I do without? What do I really need to survive?
What's important to
important to me? And what they found out that's really important is hugs, kisses, and loved ones. Because if you've taken them away from you, you realise that they're actually something that you really want. And we probably took it all for granted and didn't even appreciate it. But now, and guess what? You don't need any money for any of this, pretty much. You can do it on a shoestring. Well, we've got a shoestring thing coming. So actually, this is a sign and an indicator of where hope lies. And, there's no point I've got an idea for Watford, that Watford should be turned into using all this space that we've got, and we've got some fantastic parks. Why not turn Watford into a beacon of health and wellness and happiness, i.e. use all the tools we've got to go in that direction, as opposed to in money-driven materialism, which is where we were going. So this gives us an opportunity to change direction. I haven't had a conversation with anybody else yet, first to hear it on here today. But it's like, well, they've got great parks. We've just introduced a bike scheme where people can pay for a bike, get on one and cycle around the town. There's some really good initiatives that have already been put in place. Whether they were mindful or not doesn't matter, but they're already there, like exercise equipment in the parks. Why not take that as almost like a brave, sort of almost subconscious initiative, and then start saying, well, okay, what about if we bring all the health practitioners together, all the complementary people together? What if we start to use this as an objective for living in Watford? It's a great place because people who live in Watford live longer, they're happier, they seem to be doing things that they like doing. What about that as a basis for taking other towns in that same direction? Because
it does have to be local and sort of,
grassroots.
And
And I read something today about, you know, towns self-governing as opposed to being central control out of Whitehall. And then you can, Jenny, you can then say to people, who do you know in the local economy or local people that if you cut them in half, it said Watford, like a stick of rock, you know, it went all through their body, and all they're interested in is helping the people of Watford to have a better life. Those people should be doing public office jobs, shouldn't they? Those are the people that you want, because they're not doing it for their own back pocket. They're not doing it for their own self-gratification. They're doing it because they love where they are and they want to see the best for it. Now,
the thing is, sorry to interrupt you, Chris. I mean, I sometimes sit on our council here. I'm not a councillor, but I sometimes sit on when I've got things I need to raise with them. And, you know, they're well-meaning people. They're good people. They're Dunmowans. They're through and through Dunmowans. But you've still got local politics. You've still got the obstructors and the people that want to keep the status quo and don't want things to change. So, you know, there's a lot of ossification in structures, existing structures, and there will be a lot of objection to the people organising themselves. Yes, it's the last thing that the corporations want.
Absolutely, but if you're not asking them for money, you're not asking them for anything, right? Then you could just get on and do it, can't you?
You can, but then you've got going back to something Otis was saying about people, you know, like and yourself, Chris. I mean, I don't want to be a spanner in the work. I want to be realistic. I want to sort of say it's a war of minds. You know, if the media, the mainstream media, can captivate the minds of people, they've won. So this is why I think it all starts with going deep inside. I mean, you'd think I was working flat out with my psychotherapy practice, and I haven't been. I don't know why not. Maybe I'm not very prominent. I don't market myself incredibly well nowadays. I'm kind of doing more with the gardening. But there's not a lot of people looking for help at the moment. But I think there will be.
Yeah.
I think there will be.
Absolutely.
Now, what a fantastic opportunity for me to help them become truly resourceful, truly independent. You know, anyone who's working with the mind, anyone in alternative health, all of us have a responsibility to really nurture and school people in how to be their true selves, how to take charge of what they can take charge of.
Just
you know what I mean?
And a quarter million of you.
Yeah, and I think from there is where you get that fire to want to change all of the various areas, you know, because I think about things like some things aren't anybody's fault, in the sense of, like, say, for instance, the birth of Instagram and the comparison culture that helped perpetuate. It's like, and the suicide that then's on the fallout of that, and the further in the mental health issues and the issues with self-esteem. And when you think about all of that, you think about the fact that helps, you know, people become captivated by these things that are mainstream media, or they leave the responsibility for somebody else to tell them what to do rather than think about it for themselves. And all of these things contribute to the numbing of our minds almost. And it's figuring out how to get around that almost, I guess, because it's hard coded almost.
I think one of the ways is, and we're all doing it at the moment, like I said a few minutes ago, I've never made so many lifelong friends in the last 3 months, because we're all beating with the same heart, is getting as many people together of the same heart and mind. And we've started it here in Dunmow. We've got a skill sharing group network, and we're coming together to sort of, at the moment we're practicing meditation and chanting in the park, in an open venue. We want to attract as many people as possible to us, but ultimately we want it to be a skill sharing base, so that when it comes to what it is we need from each other, we can step in. One of the things I'm offering, I used to be a school teacher. I taught management, and I actually, now obviously then I'm a psychotherapist, and now I teach conflict resolution, self-awareness, self-responsibility, and now gardening and medicine. I make my own medicines. There's so much I could teach. And I think, you know, I've been putting myself out on Facebook saying, listen, if you don't want to send your kids into these indoctrination systems anymore, but forget the virus, if you don't want to indoctrinate your child to be terrified of other children, bring them into the home and let's set up a home school. So I've got loads of skills I can offer. I'm a trained teacher, but there's a whole bunch of other people in my Skillshare network who have things they could offer, like woodworking and all kinds of things. So I think organising locally, only with the people that are already conscious and awake and are able to really support each other, and slowly as that grows, it's kind of bringing people into that fold, isn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, as with all these things, it's about, you just grow step by step, don't you? And bit by bit. And like you say to me, Dad, sometimes it starts with 10% and then 15, 20. And then as soon as you get to a certain percentage, it's like people will see a bunch of people having fun and they'll go, I want to go partake in that. And that's kind of how you affect change, we hope. But
I mean, I think it depends on the project. Like, you only need one or two people who want to create something sustainable, something that's not dependent on money, that will weather a storm of contraction that we're going to experience over the next 6 to 7 years, probably. And then you can appeal to other people. They don't even need to be what the term awake, I'm not keen on it, but they don't even need to be that aware of what's going on. They just need to say, oh, I quite enjoy doing that, I want to join in. And then through the period of osmosis and discussion that ensues from those people doing whatever it is they're doing together, albeit gardening or anything, they will start to imbibe a rhetoric and a set of ideas that they start to ponder on. And they almost all we're doing is getting people on the path of something that
having conversations
that works for them, and they just want to have to enjoy what they're doing, really. That's all it comes down to. And you need some people there that are almost like in the old days. It would have been, I don't know, it might have been the church leader, or it might have been some medicine man or some older person who's got some wisdom, and all we're doing really is encouraging people to participate and learn as they go, whatever it is. But at least that's going in a direction which is sustainable, whereas most of what we're involved in at the moment is unsustainable because it's based on oil, and we know that oil at the price it needs to be at to sustain what we're doing is running out. So prices have to go up, which means we end up back where we are anyway, which means there's not enough to go around. It means famine and other things starting to take place. But one point I wanted to make, and I know I'm conscious of the time, we've only got about 10 minutes left, is that something that Otis and I spoke about is that if you take our age group, Jenny, we may have a pot of money stashed by, we may be perceived as being able to follow our goals because we haven't got a mortgage to pay, or we haven't got this to pay for. So life seems a bit easier for people in our age group, and it's like, well, they don't have to worry, do they? They ain't got to go out and work every day. And then you've got people in Otis's age group are saying, well, I've got to go out to work every day. I've been told what to do, but I can't see myself ever having a house like my mum and dad, because those things, those ideologies were in the 80s, not in 2020. So I've missed it. And now I don't know what to do. And mum and dad aren't interested in talking to me about it either. They just said, well, we did it. I don't understand why you can't do it. Get out of here and go get a job. Don't do something constructive. And consequently, that age group, the 30s, 80s, there's a huge number of people that ought not to be disappointed that contraction is on the horizon, because actually it's the escape route to a pathway which no longer exists. And then what you've got is you've got the 20-year-olds, the 18-year-olds who have basically said, well, I don't want to follow what mum and dad are doing, running around like blue-ass flies, trying to make ends meet, stressed, anxious, worried, and not a moment to themselves, no time for reflection. We're just busy charging about. Why would I want to copy that? And they're not even entering the game. But there's loads of ideas there, and they're going to have to live longer in this society than anybody else. So actually, if we could bring the three generations together, the ideas of the young, because they're going to need to come up with some ideas, not put all the pressure on them, because then the middle age, Otis's age, can say, well, we know how to use technology really well and we can make those things happen. But actually, do you know what, Dad or Jenny, you've got some money there and you've got some resources and some connections. Can you help us with your wisdom, if we've got any?
I think there's a really significant role for elders, people that have gone before. And what's happening at the moment is the youth are being peeled away from us. And that is the desire of these, you know, these controllers, the fat controllers. They don't want the youth schooled by the elders of the society. They want to strip them away, tell them that meat is evil, they've got to go vegan, it's our fault that we're living in a toxic world, etc., etc. But it isn't our fault. We have all been collectively led to this point by big, big forces that have lots of money and lots of ability to exploit everybody. So I totally agree with you, Chris. We have to bring generations together. We have to learn from each other. You know, as part of the Buddhist movement that we live in, we say that I practice in, we say that the energy of youth is fearless, but the wisdom of the elders is grounding. And you need them both. You need both forces. And you know, when it comes to, you know, people of your and my age group, Chris, I haven't got any bloody money. I'm skint, right? I've got 120 grand on this house that I can't pay off, and I'm paying interest only, right? But I'm skint. But I don't care. I separated my personal worth from money years ago. It doesn't bother me. What I love about my life is I do whatever I want, whenever I want. Yeah?
Yeah. I can add a couple of things there. What I want, when I want, with who I want, for as long as I want.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I knew that was coming.
But the thing is, you know, that doesn't mean, oh, I'm the big I am, you know. No, I've got no money. But the amount of value I create is incredible. And I'll say it. You know, I share a lot of my wisdom with my clients. I'm teaching people how to grow vegetables. I'm constantly helping people with cuts and grazes and things that have gone wrong with their body with natural resources. You know, there's the value that I'm bringing is you know, money.
Priceless.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to say money, but priceless. Absolutely. So, but the thing is, I've only been able to do that because I've done an inside job, which is, if I've got no money 1 or 2 weeks, I think, fuck, I've got no money. Sorry, I've got no money. I'd better double up my efforts and get some money in, which I do for a few weeks. And then suddenly the money starts to flow a little bit better. And I'm all right for a while. And I just think, oh, well, I'll take the foot off that gas pedal because I don't need it at the moment. And that's how my life pans out. And I'm really, really happy with the way I live. I like it. I don't need to break my, you know, guts about earning so many thousands of pounds per month in order to sustain a lifestyle that I've become accustomed to. What's that for?
Yeah, exactly. That literally depicts the spirit of an adventurer, which is something that I personally struggle with, which is why I think my generation will struggle with it, is because the focal point always is money. How am I going to pay the bills? How can we replace what we've got when I still need to pay the bills? And that's kind of like, you know, what you said about, like, you know, 2 weeks, you spend a bit of time harder graft in that area because you know you need to get that. And then once that's okay, you sort of take your pedal off there, you focus your energy somewhere else. And it's like, it's more about not thinking that there's like this end destination that you're getting to and then everything's going to be okay when you get to that point. It's like you're here now, living it, in amongst it, living life. And it's about waking up every day and ensuring that you do the best and provide the most value like you're doing. And that just does oodles for your self-worth that money will never do, you know?
Yeah. And money comes. Money comes. It just comes when you need it most. If your life is put in service to others, money comes in the most bizarre ways you wouldn't expect. And you just have to keep open to it. It will come. You know, and this is a trust and faith in a journey. You know, put yourself in service. Don't be stupid. Don't sort of wear yourself to a frazzle like I've done with my back recently, but nevertheless, don't wear yourself to a frazzle and then end up, you know, like a pauper. Make sure that you look after yourself, because it's a bit of the old, you know, the mask on the plane. Put yours on first. And then you're of great benefit to other people, you know.
Yeah, very true.
I think it's a transit. The issue really for your age, your generation, and I think this lockdown has helped. And I think the gradual contraction of the global economy is going to also help. But it's essentially it's working out what you need and what you don't need. Because I think what happens is people start. You know, I remember a lady who used to work in London as a legal secretary, and she earned somewhere in the region of £40,000 a year. But when she worked out the actual cost of getting there, the lunches, the breakfast, all the clothes and everything else, when she worked it all out, she realised she could live on a salary of 13,000 if she never went out of her house. Right, so she found a job locally for like 12 grand, and she was fine. You know, like she only had to work a few hours. She had loads of time. She could live her life. She was happy. Right, so I think it's what it is it's going inside, which is what Jenny mentioned, and actually saying what is important, what do I actually need, and how can I do that? And you know, even if it means working 2 days a week, 3 days a week for somewhere, there is a way.
Yeah.
And this is about adventure. This adventurism is about how can I do this? Putting the thinking cap on, using the intelligence and creativity, and saying how can I do this, rather than saying how am I going to get 40 grand.
Precisely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think we've kind of got to a time where we're running out of time, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be more of these. By the way, there are some other people that have asked to join us on this thing. So possibly, another one or two, or maybe a different set of people talking about different subjects.
We can talk about structure as well. I don't know how to do it, whether we do like live things that people can come and interact with, and maybe, you know, questions are fired back. And
well, I did investigate that. We could have streamed this live. I ran out of time setting it up, but we could have streamed it live and then had comments coming through on a Facebook feed. So there are ways of making it interactive and engaging with people, and I'll have a look into that.
Cool. All right.
Yeah, thanks for letting me join you today. It's been really great.
Thanks for instigating it.
Yeah. Thank you for
actually, technically, we joined you.
Okay.
Speak to you all soon.
Yeah, take care.
See you. Bye now.